Hello.
Hey, hello.
Hello, Patti. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. How are you today?
I'm doing great. What about you? What time is it over there?
Oh, it's mid-morning for me, 10:30, and for you in the evening, huh?
Yes, it is half past seven.
So I'm your date for Friday night.
Technically speaking, opening the weekend. Let's put it this way.
There we go, the kickoff party.
Very nice to meet you. So, um, let me tell you little information about how this is going to work. So, the main topic, of course, is this one that I see you have a copy there by chance.
Yay. Thank you so much for reading it and for your curiosity to talk about it.
So, Patti, I think honestly, this was a perfect timing. By the way, I mean, straight in a moment in which nobody knew how to behave, like in the middle of a pandemic, in which everything stopped. We needed like to go one step further, one step beyond. For example, I remember how many questions like how many users can join a Teams call at the same time? What about
Yeah.
Zoom? Shall we use Google Meet? No, nobody really knew. I mean, we were using them, but like as a
Yes.
as side tools. And then all of a sudden, we needed to go one step beyond. In that moment, nobody knew which tool, how to streamline the process, what were the best practices. We literally were lost, and you come up with presenting virtually. I mean, and everything is well organized, well set, plenty of advices from the strategy to the delivery. I mean, I'm very curious to know everything about this book. How did you? I mean, how did you come up with the idea first?
Well, I was living through everything you just described, the challenges of figuring out how to do all of our business online. Like you said, we were using these platforms at Duarte. I've been using remote meeting technology for decades, really. But what we had to do when the pandemic shut everything down was to convert all of our training to online exclusively. And so that meant we had to reimagine the whole experience for learners. And at the same time, on the other side of our business, we were working with really huge global brands on their events that also had to pivot to virtual. And so we were feeling that pain ourselves and trying new things to make it not just work, but to make it great for audiences. And as I was learning what really did work, I felt compelled to share it. And that's one of the things we like to do at Duarte is share what we know, to be not just somebody who figures something out, but somebody who teaches other people how to figure it out too.
So you found yourself all of a sudden in a situation in which you were the person to go to solve the issue, basically, because I mean, if having to organize all these big events with clients, and then all of a sudden you get requests. So I imagine how should we transition them? Plus the trainings. I mean, trainings are a big thing, and with the pandemic, training completely stopped, like from one day to the other, because of budget, because of ways of delivery. People were not sure, corporate were not sure whether this was going to be effective as well or not. And so this is the moment in which you stepped in, you solved the issue, and you streamlined and published the best practices. Tell us more about you. What do you do at Duarte? Tell us more, because this is very interesting I mean, learning from real experience, then organizing everything, creating the framework, and sharing it.
Well, my background is in communication. I've been a marketer for my entire career, about 30 years or so, and in that role, I've always used presentations, and I believe really strongly that presentations are a powerful medium for influencing people, for bringing people together, for moving ideas forward. And so I joined Duarte several years ago to help us get that word out more, that presentations matter, and to help organizations really get excellent at presentations. And for several years, I was on the creative side of the business, working directly with leaders on their own presentations, consulting with them, helping them build them. Then right before the pandemic, I moved over to our training side of the business to lead development of our training products. And that's my role in the business now. And the idea of the training business is what I was saying a minute ago, which is to codify what we learn working with big brands and well-known leaders into methodologies, tools, systems that anybody can use to elevate their presentations and communication too. So that's what I do, is take knowledge, turn it into frameworks that other people can understand and apply.
I love when you, I mean, looking at the background, what I really love is everything starts from experience. So it's like, okay, you said, I have a background in marketing. I was doing a lot of presentations, like I was a lot into presentations. And then when you started at Duarte, you said you were actually coaching leaders. You were working, as far as I understand, side by side with them, helping them to deliver their message. And then afterwards you moved to training. So like you could actually bring a lot of experience into the training, a lot of concrete and actual experience to the training, and then spread the words. But it's very interesting, the concreteness, right, of the background that brings concrete, real experience to on the table through the trainings.
Yes, yes. Well, and part of what drives that too is an idea that comes from storytelling, which is that in every story, there's a hero. There's a hero, a person who's trying to get something done, and then something happens to them. It's called an inciting incident that throws their world off balance. And now all of a sudden, they don't know what to do. They are faced with new challenges, which is what happened to all of us during the pandemic, by the way. And what usually happens in the story is that somebody shows up to help that hero when they're most stuck, when they're really struggling with a challenge, a trial, a test, and that person is a mentor. And we like to think at Duarte of ourselves as mentors, but we especially want you as a communicator to think of yourself as a mentor. And when you see yourself that way, it changes how you communicate so that you put your audience in your mind, you walk in their shoes, and you do what you need to do to help them, to make them be successful, which comes all the way back to being practical, being pragmatic, giving people takeaways, and making information understandable, interesting, but also useful.
It's very interesting how you build a process to make the best practices shareable in a way, because I like the idea of the guide, the mentor, and the hero. I was discussing this in a previous interview with Gar Reynolds as well. He always makes the example of, if I remember well, of Yoda Master and Luke Skywalker. I remember this, which I think perfectly makes a point, by the way. And I love the idea that you are challenging actually your clients to walk one extra mile. It's not just, okay, we're here to help. Yes, we're here to help you. You start as a hero, but you become the guide in the future. This is more than just helping and supporting them. This is empowering them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So everything that I teach in presenting virtually, everything that I advise people on is how to be more helpful to their audience, how to move them along. There's no reason for you to communicate, to give a presentation, if it doesn't change your audience in some way, if it doesn't enable them, empower them in some way to do something better by the time they're done hearing your message. And I think that's especially important in a virtual presentation setting, because they are watching you in an environment that's very distracting. It's even harder for them to stay focused on you. So you have to put more effort into making it an engaging experience for them and making it easier for them to stay interested and to get some takeaway value.
And it's very interesting the fact you say that a presentation moves the audience, right? It enriches them and it changes them in a way. At the end of the day, I believe that we are sharing information with them, and this information they have, then they might have an impact, or they might not, but the way we deliver the message makes a huge difference.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes. I mean, the message matters for sure, but how you visualize the message, how you bring it to life with your words, with your body also matters.
This is, I think, the key of presentations. I mean, the core of presentations. When I started reading your book, one thing that I love to start with was the foreword, right? So I started from the foreword, and then I jumped straight to the end, and I read about you. And there are like the beginning and the end. There were two information that got my attention from the beginning. The first one was, wow, Patti managed to actually turn training experiences into something that was live in presence to something that was online. This happened in a matter of at light speed, because you were extremely fast as far as I understood, and this amazes me. Did you? I mean, if I think about, I take a training of 1 day, 2 days in a classroom, I cannot just replicate that on Teams the way it is, right? So on Zoom or whatever it is, but I mean, how do you do that? How do you make the magic happen?
Well, like you said, we started with 1 day and 2 day in-person workshops. And when the pandemic shut everything down, our facilitators had to cancel all their flights, come back to the office, and we just got in a virtual room actually on Zoom and said, how can we make a new version of our training that really uses the medium to its maximum potential? And all kinds of ideas. We just did a brainstorming session. All kinds of ideas first came out, and we were thinking about almost like what is a parallel to what we are trying to do. So for instance, a lot of times events can be live streamed, right? And that's how things were done pretty routinely in the past. There'd be a bunch of people in a room together, and then there'd be a camera pointed to the speaker on the stage, and that camera pointed to the speaker would live stream to the internet, a web page that people could watch. And so that was one idea that came up, but I don't want to sit and watch 8 hours of training or 16 hours of training. No, nobody will do that. It's not kind to the audience. And so we threw that idea away. And then we said, so what would be interesting to the audience, to the learners? How do we need to change the experience? And one big aha that we got, and we tested this with customers, is it was really about chunking it up into shorter chunks of time, right? So people can't sit and pay attention for that long in a virtual setting. So it needs to be shorter segments. And so we broke all of our training up into episodes. But even within those episodes of 90 minutes or less, we knew that we also needed to use the medium to really engage those learners in new ways. So they're not passive viewers of a television show, but they are active audience members. And that's what's great about virtual presentations, is there are more ways for you to interact with the audience than just asking people to raise their hand and ask a question. There were also ways to get them to engage through the chat, through polls, through breakout rooms, all forms of interaction. And so we were very intentional about where do those interactions make sense in this experience? Where do they fit the content? What kind of activity is the best way to bring this idea to life and also make it fun for people? So that's where we started.
It's I think interaction is the key word here, and you were saying sometimes it's impressive to me how simple things can make the difference, because sometimes it's just, as you said, raising the hand, interacting in the chat. One thing that, for example, I noticed is that when I'm delivering a live presentation, maybe an event, I always want people to interact by chat, but at the beginning they're kind of shy. So before I even start talking, I ask them, guys, would you mind to just drop a message in the chat? Just send me hello, buongiorno, or what's the weather like where you are connected? starting from just let me. So for me, so I see you can use the chat, right? It's just an excuse for them to start using it, to start interacting. And I noticed I did some tests, like in some presentations I did it, in some others I didn't. In the one where you make them use the chat from the beginning, it's like they're breaking a barrier. And then they will feel more natural to go back to the tool and chat with you. What do you think about this?
Very much so. A really fundamental rule of interaction with audiences is you need to let them know how you want them to interact with you early on. You have to create that norm, because especially now, I think there has become a norm where people just decide to turn their cameras off, to turn their microphones off and passively participate. And if you're expecting more from your audience, you need to let them know that this is going to be a dialogue and that you want them to jump in and be a part of it from the very beginning. So I love that you ask people to interact in the chat really quickly. And it's a great idea to have your first interaction within the first 5 or 10 minutes anyway, just because it will set that norm. It'll draw them into your conversation. But what's also really smart about the way that you do it with the chat is that you want to warm them up. A lot of times when people are giving virtual presentations and they say, oh, the audience is so quiet. You know, I asked everybody to come off mute and say something, but nobody would. And I say, the problem is you went too far too fast. You're expecting people to do something that I always call like a moderate level of effort interaction, to turn on your microphone, to turn on your camera and speak to the group is very intimidating for a lot of people. And that takes a lot of energy and risk for them, especially if they're introverts. So you got to warm them up first. If they can just type a phrase into the chat, that's a lower stakes, simpler kind of interaction to get them thinking and engaging without having to put themselves at risk too much right away. And I certainly wouldn't send them into a breakout room 5, 15, 10 minutes into a presentation. That's just too much. It's like if you were standing in a big ballroom giving a presentation and you wanted to involve the audience, and instead of just asking somebody to raise their hand and ask a question, you said, come all the way up on stage with me, stand next to me and ask me that question. That's terrifying.
It is. It is, especially if, as you said, if you're introvert, but also if you're not. I mean, stepping out and coming on stage under the spotlight, and like, okay, asking the question. It's freezing. If you imagine during a presentation, if we are like in a small meeting room, even if we are between colleagues, and all of a sudden we start looking at the person only, like instead of looking at everybody, it's like putting the spotlight onto them, and they already feel embarrassed. I can only imagine when being in front of everybody, right? Because at the end of the day, this is what happens. Yes, we are facing a camera, but the truth is that on the other side of the screen there are people, and you're looking one single point, but you're actually looking plenty of people at the same time, and they're all looking at you. So
absolutely. And you have to think about the environment that they're in as well. And if you're presenting to an audience that is dialing in from home, and maybe they've got it's in the evening or end of their day, and they've got kids running around screaming, or they're trying to get their partner's trying to get dinner ready in the kitchen, that might be why they don't have their camera on, or they don't feel comfortable sharing. And so you need to understand that as well, and create the kind of interactions that are going to make sense for that moment, that type of presentation that you're doing, and for that audience. If you know they're introverted, or if you know they're a bunch of parents who are at home trying to get things done, then don't ask too much of them. Make a different ask of them.
It's curious. I remember some parts of the book in which you said something that I loved, because I think it's a book that talks a lot about people, about the audience. And one thing that I liked is that you were saying, yeah, sometimes we have the dogs barking. I do. We have I don't know, somebody going on, maybe the kids going back and forth. And you said something like sometimes you don't necessarily have to escape this, because it makes you more human in a way. And I love this, because this like puts people first. Anyway, this is real life, right? Most of us, we share it. So this is something that I like very much. But there was also a strong part of the book, in which I remember that it is highly recommended not to to present or to interview with dirty dishes, apparently.
Yeah. Well, it's another way of thinking empathetically about your audience. You don't want to give them extra distractions. So one of the things I talk about in the book is the idea that a virtual presentation has 3 layers to it, what we call TriCast, but it's a sort of a fancy way of just acknowledging that everything that's seen through the frame of the camera is potentially going to help you communicate your message, or it's going to detract from your message. And by that, I mean, if there's a bunch of clutter in the background behind you, that frame draws more attention to whatever is inside of it. And so the clutter in the background might be really distracting to your audience and make it hard for them to focus on what you're saying, or the dogs barking in the background. But you, on the flip side, could use what's behind you to communicate something intentionally, like having a copy of your books, or that, you know, beautiful curated scene that you have behind you. I think it's gorgeous.
This is, and I honestly think absolutely the same about yours, with your beautiful books there. Now, today we won't have time to talk about Illuminate, but it will come. This is something I have been researching for a month. Like at the beginning, I remember the first days of like all the events were going to be virtual. I was called a speaker at events and I had to, of course, you're the speaker, so you talk about presentations, so of course you have to be like the one who knows what to do. But at the beginning,
no pressure, right?
Yeah, no pressure. Like, okay, your slides have to be perfect, your delivery has to be perfect. Let's see how he presents, because therefore is a reference, right? But then at the beginning, I remember that I started ordering everything on Amazon. And so the first thing that I ordered was a backdrop. It was a huge, massive backdrop, like that I had in my house, hanging on the stairs, and it was coming down, and I was in front of this, having this behind me, and like I was even, I remember at the beginning they even had textures. So I had one in wood texture, I had one in stones texture, these kind of things. But then I remember that once, while doing a presentation, I accidentally moved and touched it, and this moved everything. And you know, stone doesn't do that. A wall of stone doesn't do that. So like people said, what is this?
Shattered the illusion that you were in, like you know, a villa.
Yes. And this was like one of the first experiments. I spent months trying from backdrops to virtual backdrops. At a certain point, I remember, who was that? I think IKEA published a collection of virtual backdrops, virtual backgrounds, okay, for teams. And you had these like these offices imagined by IKEA, and they were very nice, very beautiful arranged. But especially at the beginning, even the filter clearing in the background was not very good. And so it was like, depending also on your hairs, okay, especially if you had no hairs, okay, then you would look perfect on virtual background. But if you had some, and then they were not perfectly smooth, then it was so and so. So I spent so much.
You're describing my pain from 2020 perfectly. I mean, I'm having flashbacks now.
What have you done? How was your path?
Well, I tried all of those things as well. And certainly we did lots of experiments. Our designers are very nerdy. They love geeking out on presentation technology and design techniques. And so we had a bunch of designers who were doing all kinds of research, ordering various kits, and we were sending kits of the materials that work best to our clients for the home recording by the CEO, for an internal all hands or something like that. And it's possible to make it work. And when I say make it work, I mean virtual backgrounds are possible to pull off, but difficult, in my opinion, for the average presenter working from home, for it to look realistic and if it doesn't look realistic, then it's very distracting. So in my personal experience, like you said, my hair, and sadly, it's kind of thin and it gets all spindly at the bottom here, and it confuses the camera. It can't tell whether I'm a solid object or not. And anyway, my hair coloring's too light. I had incredible difficulty trying to get a virtual background to work in my home environment, properly lit with the right distance, that I wouldn't like tear when I accidentally step backwards into it, just like you described. So for that reason, I and a lot of my designer friends are not fans of virtual backgrounds. We instead are more often using physical backdrops like you also described. We've experimented with fabric ones. We're now using paper ones in a studio at our office on a giant roll, a beautiful sort of textured color backgrounds, but they require a very precise setup, right? Of the speaker a certain distance from it, the lighting a certain distance from the speaker and the backdrop to make sure there aren't any unnatural looking shadows. That, you know, sometimes the colors still don't render perfectly through the camera, and so it can be challenging. And then the person has to change their wardrobe to make sure that there's enough contrast between them and the color and all that jazz. Just makes it a lot harder. It's worth that investment if it's a very, what I would call, sort of sophisticated presentation, that really high stakes situation where you need this to look so polished like a television show, then get some professional help to get that environment set up for you, either at home or at a studio or at the office. But for the average presenter, for the casual conversations, even sort of the mid-range type of presentations, your audience will be forgiving of a little imperfection in your environment, but they will be distracted if it looks fake. So that's why I'm not a fan of the virtual backgrounds on everyday situations.
I finally, I can't agree more. I ended up finally with real backgrounds. So you said, so this is home for you, right?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
This is my home. Yes.
And I think this was because to me it's home as well. And at the beginning, this was one of the biggest challenges. Like, okay, if I'm in the office, maybe I have some space, I can arrange, I can do things. But if I'm at home, like I remember building these structures with all the background, then I didn't have the distances, and then the camera, then the lens, and so it was complex. And nowadays it's so normal for me to have like a home. I have like a room dedicated to the studio, because nowadays it's a studio, but also this changed everything. Even the computer performances needed to increase. Of course, I remember like in the first 6 months, there was this, there was this teeny 13 inches laptop that I loved. I've been using that for 10 years, always the same model. Like in the first years of the pandemic, just started live streaming, I literally melted it. It bent. And then when I contacted Dell, they told me, no, but it's melt. It's just, how do you do that?
Yes, I've had to upgrade all of my hardware for sure. And I have a better microphone now. I use a Yeti, and I will never use the camera built into the laptop or the audio built into the laptop because it's just too tinny or too imperfect.
So this means that you use a different camera, right?
Well, I'm using a webcam that's on a secondary monitor. So I have the laptop typically is where I push my slides from. If I'm giving a presentation, then I have another monitor, which is where I view my speaker notes, and I put the speaker note view, the presenter view, underneath the webcam that's at the top of that monitor, so that it looks like I'm making eye contact the whole time I'm talking to you. But little do you know, I have notes right here.
Yeah, it's and this is one of the things I like to use the most, the presenter view in PowerPoint with the speaker notes. And mostly, I rarely have a lot of notes, but what I couldn't survive without is seeing the next coming slide. This is very important to me. I need to know which slide is coming next. For those who will be listening and don't know what is the presenter view, is the mode of PowerPoint where you see the current slide projected to the audience and the next coming slide plus underneath the speaker notes. Now, the next coming slide to me plays a crucial role because it gives me the possibility to know at which time during my speech I want to flip my slide and show something to people, because I know that the moment I will flip my slide, people will stop looking at me for a second. I will lose them. They will check the slide. They will see what's on the slide. They will try to match what I'm saying with what they're seeing, and so that will be the moment in which I know that I might lose them for a few seconds. A few seconds if the slide is well designed. Otherwise, you might lose them forever. But if the slide is well designed, you lose them for a few seconds, and then the timing, the moment you flip the slide, in my opinion, is crucial. And the only way to do that is, in my opinion, using the presenter view, because I would never recommend to learn a presentation by heart.
Yeah, well, yeah, it takes a lot of memory power to learn that presentation by heart, and there's not as much RAM in my head as there used to be. So yeah, I do need my notes.
The presenter view, I think, makes a huge difference and makes us more comfortable when we deliver a presentation, because we have always the situation under control. We can't go blackout completely, because we always know what we have to say. Worst case scenario is there in front of us. And I love the idea of using the two screens, having one in which we project the other one with the presenter view. So disassociating the slideshow from the presenter view. This is something that I like very much. But there was a keyword that I caught, like when just few sentences before, you said you thought that it depends on the kind of presentation that you want to deliver. So there are different kinds of presentations. You wrote in the book that there are linear presentation, interactive presentation, collaborative presentations, right? So this means that we might face different kinds of presentations, and for that we need to prepare, meaning that each presentation might be useful, having pros and cons compared to the others, to a certain situation instead of another one.
Yeah. Well, to think about these, the linear, interactive, and collaborative, you can almost use analogies like from television. The linear presentation, sort of like a monologue. You know, when the host comes out on stage and talks for a while, and it's got a clear beginning, middle, and an end. And they're not really interested in having a lot of dialogue. They want applause, but they're not having a conversation with anybody. It's just them getting their ideas out. And a lot of times this also is used in the business situation for a traditional keynote. The main stage keynote, whether it's in person or virtual, is a linear presentation, or a TED-like talk is a linear presentation. I have certain ideas I want to get out in a certain order. I don't want to be interrupted. And since the pivot to virtual, with more people working remotely, we have seen that audiences have shorter attention spans. And at Duarte, we did a study a couple of years ago to ask people, what is your preference for how virtual communication happens and for different types of presentations? And those linear ones, they want them to be short, no more than 30 minutes, more like 20 minutes, or that TED-like length. And the challenge is that if you're not interacting with the audience during that time, then it really raises the bar for your content, your visuals, your delivery to be really amazing, to keep them involved. And that's different than the interactive presentation, which I would say is more like a webinar, where you typically people expect to have some interaction with the speaker. And it's almost like segments in a TV show. Like you can present a chunk of your information and then pause for an interaction, like a poll, or to take a question, or to do some interaction in the chat, and then another chunk of information, just like on a TV show where you have different sorts of segments. And then the collaborative presentation is really where the audience is a co-creator with you. And the best example of that is really more like a training workshop, where the point of people being there is not just to hear you, but to participate, to apply what you're talking about, practice it themselves. And so that's a really different kind of presentation too, where the interaction's basically happening all the time.
And I think when this is something that that I like to use a lot when, for example, I find myself in a situation in which I'm delivering a workshop, for example, and I ask people to join, do things, and I constantly ask them to also share the screen, to share with others, and tell us what they're doing, to also comment on the achievement and help them and support them. So one thing that I always dreamt about is why do we have, maybe as far as I know, I'm nerdy, but probably not enough. I would love, for example, why on Teams, on Zoom, only one person can share the screen? Imagine if all of the participants could share the screen at the same time. I mean, that would be amazing, no?
Well, I mean, it would be possibly chaos too, and maybe that's why they don't allow it. But that's one of the reasons why we like to sometimes use the digital collaboration platforms during a workshop. So think about Miro or Mural, and certainly the virtual meeting platforms. Many of them have their own whiteboard sort of functionality. They're a little bit more limited in my experience, but I think of that as almost like that. The town hall, town square, where the audience can all sort of share something visual that everybody else can look at and react to.
I think once again we go back to the key point we were discussing at the beginning, the concept of interaction, right? I think that this is one of the most challenging things in online presentations. At the end of the day, when you're live, it's more natural to connect with people empathetically and create this kind of interaction. But when it comes to online presentations, then it's completely different. It's a challenge. And one thing that I loved in the book is the part in which you write that interaction must be planned. It's not like you prepare a presentation. Okay, yes, you have a storyline, you have the beginning, you have the middle, you have the end, you have the conflict, you have the hero. Okay, but then what I loved is once you actually lay down the structure of your presentation, you already start thinking from the beginning, what are the moments in which you have to trigger interaction, and you prepare for that in advance.
Well, very much so. So I'm a big planner. But I also believe that makes communication better, to prepare, think about your audience, think about what you want to communicate to them, and for what purpose. And a way to think about that is, what is your audience think about your idea before you present, and what do you want them to think about it by the time you're done? And that difference is the move to kind of journey that you need to take your audience on. And once you've thought through, what do they think now? What do you want them to think? That helps you determine the messages that you want to communicate to them about that idea. But then that also starts to spark ideas about the kinds of interactions or ways that you want to involve them in that message, so that you actually do cause the change you want to see. So we have an online course based on presenting virtually, and in there's a presentation canvas, basically, that you storyboard your presentation on, which takes you through these questions of who are they, where do you want to move them, and then what do you need to say, what do you need to do, which is where those interactions come in.
It's, in my opinion, this is really changing the way we approach the presentation preparation from the very beginning, because I see many people, what they do, they just start PowerPointing, right? But the truth is that at the beginning, what we have to plan what we want to say, what we don't want to say, what we want to say first, what we want to say afterwards. Therefore, what we call the storyline, right? The order in which we deliver the messages. Now, in presentations, we've always learned that we have to plan the moments of conflict to create, right, to hook the audience and catch their attention. Then we have the Aziz, then we have the to be, and then again the Aziz, and then the to be, right? We create this kind of like what it could be, but what it is right now, and this tension between the present and the future is what takes you to accept the journey, probably, and maybe change, maybe move in the future. But now this is not enough anymore, and we plan one more step, the interaction. I mean, these literally things, at the moment you are planning your presentation, you're done with your storyline, you start thinking, okay, at which point will I be at this slide? Okay, this will be like after 15 minutes. Okay, so this means that probably here I have to do something. Like, okay, let's run a poll, let's involve them, let's ask them to do, to answer a question, or maybe let's ask their experiences on the topic.
Exactly. And it's almost an analysis tool that you can use. If you think about the different types of interactions, those simple, moderate, complex, different kinds of things like a chat, a poll, a breakout discussion, a whiteboarding activity, think of those as almost elements of contrast, like spices that you can add into your presentation. Once you've got that outline, look back over it and say, have I gone too long before I involved them? Every 10 to 15 minutes or so, probably, and certainly within every chunk of your content, you want to engage them in some way. And I believe you also should do that in a variety of ways, so it doesn't get monotonous for the audience. I think in olden days webinars, it was common to talk, poll, talk, poll, talk, poll. Well, by the second one, I know what you're doing as an audience member, and I'm already yawning because I know what's going to come next. You're going to push another poll, and I'm just bored by that. So I'm going to start tuning out. So you need some variety of interactions as well as just that frequency.
Variety is another key learning that I've got from your book. For sure, interaction is like the first one, but variety. I love the idea of introducing some variation, and this made me think to many ways of doing it. Right? You were talking. I think the part of the book that comes to my mind in this moment is which you added some variety into the design. Right? You said, okay, the design has to change to vary. You have to somehow surprise the audience slide by slide, step by step. And I think
surprise is a good word for it.
Yeah. Surprise, yes. And it's like a constantly earning their attention and re-earning their attention step by step up to the end.
Yes, that's right, because they have competition. There are other sources of information, distraction all around them. And so, like you said, you have to keep earning and re-earning their attention, or hooking and re-hooking them. And TV shows do this well. They don't go too long before they do something surprising right before they go to commercial break, so you won't turn away.
Yes, that is true. We often glued to the television for maybe 4 hours, but it keeps constantly surprising you. One thing that that you made me think is when I delivering an online presentation, I have people. There are some speakers. I don't do that. I don't even blame it. It's just an approach. They tell you, okay, guys, shut everything, shut the phone, and focus. So I normally sometimes I try to challenge myself on that. So I do it the opposite way around. So instead of asking them, like imposing them to do something, I say, okay, let's see. Let's not say anything. Let's see if I manage to get their attention and win the distractions, because this is a good challenge for me, right? So if I can win it without imposing, right? Because I can't say, right? If I'm teaching, especially at university, you can just say, okay, guys, cameras on, shut the phones and shut everything other up and stay with me. Okay, yes, but then I feel like you're creating zombies that have to be like that. So if what I like, it's the opposite. It's trying to challenge, to take it as a challenge.
Absolutely. See it as an opportunity to be creative, and that rewards the audience. Your creativity will reward them by giving them good reasons to pay attention, so that you don't have to bully them into staying focused, but they do it because they want to. I mean, it starts with having an idea that's worth listening to and explaining it, bringing it to life in an interesting way, and having visuals that are refreshing and not dull and boring, and your delivery is energetic and engaging, and then interactions help with that too.
I think these all comes to empathy at the end of the day, right? It's understanding how they feel, how they might feel, and trying to behave accordingly. And there is one other thing that I love very much, is something that I always thought, this is true, it has to have a name. People always remember the beginning of the end, right, of a presentation. And I've always, like, it's something that that you've always known, and I must have repeated this millions of times to people, but then I read in the book that it actually has a name. Yeah. Is the regency, right? You call it
primacy recency. Yes. Yeah, so the thing that I heard more recently is more likely what I'm going to remember. And there's another way of describing that. The Heath brothers, Chip and Dan Heath, also talk about it in one of their books, the idea of a peak end experience. And it's a similar concept that we remember the last thing, but we also remember the most intense thing, which is peak. So those are two ways to get your audience to remember what you're saying. Make sure that your ending is memorable. It says exactly what you want them to take away. And Nancy Duarte calls that the new bliss. I mean, there's a call to action, but there also needs to be a promise that your idea is going to transform them. It's going to give them something delightful in the end. What's that outcome that they can get? But the peak is also what Nancy describes as a star moment, something they'll always remember. And that could happen in the beginning, it can happen in the middle, it can happen 2/3 of the way through your presentation. But that's where that creativity, that novelty comes in. How can you deliver a message in a very unexpected way that people won't forget?
And I think that on like creating the star moments, as Nancy calls them, I think is also the slides can play a strategic role in that, can help us to do that. Very often I get the question and they tell me, Maurizio, but okay, once I have the storyline ready, why do I need the slides? Right. And which honestly, depending on the context, it's a fair question.
Yeah.
But if the slides are used properly, if there is a good interaction, in my opinion, between the speaker and the slides, the audience and the slides, the audience and the speaker, well, then the slides are an amazing visual tool. They bring ideas to life. And so sometimes you don't need overcomplicated things done with who knows which software you can use. Sometimes just with a PowerPoint and a simple and a powerful but highly resonant picture, you can make the difference. And I love what you said is about finding the star moment, entering a star moment, triggering a star moment comes from the surprise. It's like it might happen at any stage of the presentation, but it's the moment in which you surprise the people and you literally have their attention. This is also interesting because, so now I will add one more step. People remember the beginning, the end, and the peaks.
Yes, exactly. And this is where the technology can be a great help, because there are more and more new ways for you to present information in a novel way, in a surprising way. And in the first version of virtual presentations, it was basically just another meeting in Zoom or WebEx where the speaker's video was in one window frame and their slides were another window frame, but usually the video was small and the slides were big, and audiences were basically just watching a slideshow and listening to a tiny little person explain their slides. And that gets old after a while, but it also puts the emphasis on the slides when maybe it's more important that you want them to pay attention to you and to see your face and the emotion that you're bringing to this topic. But now there are more ways to bring the speaker and their slides together. You can use streaming platforms like StreamYard, and there are other options like that. I don't know if you've heard of that, but that's another way to sort of fuse the speaker and their slides. Prezi Video does this as well. But even these presentation applications themselves, like PowerPoint and Keynote, now offer the capability to embed the speaker's video as an object into the slide. So now you're another graphic element, and it turns you into something like a weather forecaster, where you're speaking to your graphics just like on TV, and it's way more interesting than slide.
Yeah, look, I think 1 week ago, I must have recorded a video posted on my LinkedIn profile about how to use Cameo. It's amazing. I mean, I just opened PowerPoint. I took the presentation from Microsoft that has that already embedded. I put myself in camera. I just flipped a few slides, and it's impressive. I mean, for the guys who are listening to you that know, you guys that know what Cameo is, I will left a reference in the comments to the video. But the idea is that you have an object under the insert menu, now also the recording menu. If I'm right in PowerPoint, you can take this item, look, you put it on the slide, slides, and the item pictures yourself. It's the camera. It's streaming.
That's right. Yeah. So it's treating your video just like another, call it graphic or design element on your slides. And it means that you have to design your slides differently. So a good, talented, experienced graphic designer can help you reimagine your visuals so that your video makes sense. It doesn't obviously like block any information, but it's also integrated into the design of the slide.
And I think this is not leveraged enough right now. It's like, I think that it's very powerful tool because it is surprising. People don't expect that. I mean, this is not the kind of the kind of thing that people expect, because nobody's using these in corporate traditional presentations. I never see it, but if you start using it, then I think that it's one of the things that can really bring surprise. In each slide, you might literally be somewhere else. And I think this can be learning how to use it. Of course, what you said is true. It requires experience. It requires experience and skill, because at the end of the day, you are taking space on your slide. So you have some space left, and you have to make sure that the space that you've got left actually works for what you have to say. Now, I think less space on the slides, in my opinion, is always good. It's like to eat. Having less characters is always better, because you think what you really need to put on the slide up there.
That's right. Yeah, I think it really is all just going back to basics. The basics matter even more. When I say the basics, make sure your slides aren't too busy and crowded with content. Make sure your delivery is confident and dynamic. I mean, those things always mattered. They just matter more in this medium, so that you can really hold the attention of your audience and make a more interesting experience for them.
One thing I loved what you were saying is you were always comparing, right, the virtual presentations to TV shows. One of the things that I did at the beginning when we moved to virtual, I went to study how gamers stream on Twitch or on YouTube. Right, because if you look at them, it's like they live out of attention. That is their money, right? They keep people connected, and at the end of the day, they might not even be the best gamers out there, but they are extremely good at interacting and keeping attention high. And this is a word that is incredible. I got into this word, and I started looking at what they do, how they do it. Of course, they use specific tools that allow you also to live change the scene. It's like you have a production.
Like OBS.
Yes. Sorry?
Like OBS.
Like OBS, yes. I said yes, like OBS, for example, the OBS Studio. I experimented with all of them, because there is a way, guys, for those who are listening, there is a way to actually connect OBS to Zoom or to Teams and use it for live streaming. However, I believe that OBS works extremely well when you stream on YouTube or Twitch, like streaming platform that can handle that stream, because in my experience, at least, when I tried it on Teams, well, for sure, it was surprising. Like I had the possibility live, like I bought a mouse with plenty of buttons. To each button, I was connecting a different scene. And so you had like me big, like then me small with a big slide, me next to the slide, me flipped, like the slide on the other side, and me on the other side, and then me in a little circle. So, and while talking, I was changing this, and people were amazed, because when you do this, you don't have to share the screen with them. So it's like, what's going on? Like they were connected just because of what was happening. So I experienced what you say when you say you need to earn their attention and keep surprising them. This is absolutely surprising. So OBS was an amazing tool, but the problem is that for some reason, when you connect it to Teams or Zoom, apart from the fact that it requires a lot of technical stuff, virtualizing the audio and the different channels, and then I must have read everything present on the web in any language that I understand to get there. But the problem is that it blurs. The quality, in my opinion, is not as good as it is in when you just stream on Teams or on Zoom, and especially the quality of the slides blurs. And you might have whatever camera you like, but when you have the slides that are blurred and people struggle to see what's on the slide, then might not be worth it. But this is something I would love. And Teams, for example, integrated the features to do that. The fact that you can put yourself next to the slide, or you can put yourself in front of the slide. I love the idea of the weather forecaster.
Reporter mode, and
yes, and you have that. But still, I think the idea is brilliant. But still, I think the slides are blurred. I don't know why, maybe which reason. But when you unfortunately, when we have the small speaker, even if you spotlight, it's better to spotlight, but you have the small speaker, you have the big slide, that is the clearest ever. Because when you move the slide next to the speaker, which is the mode that I would prefer, absolutely, then the slide blurs still. And this is something I really couldn't figure out.
Yeah, I mean, we can expect that those platforms will get better and better. The challenge is you want to balance that creativity that keeps your audience engaged with, I'm going to say, the effort required of you, because in that OBS type of scenario, you're acting almost like a DJ, which is putting a lot more responsibility on you to basically be on stage and in the audience at the same time. You know, you're working that camera, all those different kind of camera angles. It just is more taxing on you mentally. So you've got to ask yourself, does it make sense for this situation? Is it going to be overkill? And there it goes back to the audience, having empathy for them, and the kind of conversation or presentation that makes sense for them in that moment. And whether you really need to bring on all the fireworks or not is also a choice.
Yeah, it really depends on the context. I see. But I would keep this conversation going for days. I love talking about this topic. It is exciting.
We should move to Twitch and just keep streaming.
Yes, we should do. Yes, the camera angles. Now, well, I think we are heading towards the end of our conversation, and there is one very last question that something that made me very curious in your book, and I saw a picture, I think, on your book at a certain point in which you actually were sticking people pictures or avatars, if I got it right, next to the camera, so that you could. Why was it? Was it because you wanted to picture the audience in your mind, because you wanted to connect with them? Tell me more about this, because this is something that I will always remember.
The goal is to warm my heart toward the camera, because the camera is the eye of my audience. And if you maybe weren't used to presenting to a camera, doing a lot of pre-recorded video content, then it might be challenging to at first really relate to that little black dot. And so as a hack, I put pictures of people I like next to the camera, so they actually are all around them. I got a picture of my colleague and friend Doug wearing a wig with a disco ball behind him from one of our team meetings. Got a picture of the Muppets because they make me laugh, you know, the little puppet show, TV show. And I have a picture of the actor Paul Rudd because it's pleasing to me.
Okay, I mean, I've never seen this, and I find this just amazing. But I will tell you, I will try this out. I will definitely try this out.
Give it a shot. Maybe you're Jack Russell.
Yes, I was thinking about Galileo. I will probably have plenty of pictures of my Galileo there in front of me. That would be amazing. Right. Look, first of all, before we start the registration, I wanted to thank you very much for attending for joining the conversation. I think it's been very insightful. I believe that this book is a must read, and it's full of insightful ideas for everybody who is today presenting virtually. I mean, this is something we have to do anyway. So since we have to do it, it's better we do it right. And I believe it really streamlines the process and gives all the information that we need, being for everybody, because at the same time it's for everyone. It's not too technical, but it gives you some technical insight. It doesn't pretend too much on you. It doesn't need you to be like the Steve Jobs kind of speaker, but it's for every one of us, and it really gives you the possibility. It empowers you to connect to what we were saying at the beginning. to be a better speaker, a better virtual speaker. So I think it's an amazing reading, and I strongly recommend it. Thank you very much, Patti.
Thank you so much. This was fun.